All right, well, in a few weeks in February, we're going to be opening the book of Titus and going verse by verse through that book, and we're super stoked about that. Before we get there, we want to walk through for a few weeks a series on gospel community as we take our gospel communities, which is language here at the Well for our small groups, and we multiply those on February 1st and expand those. We want to spend some time really diving into what they are biblically. And our goal the next 4 or 5 weeks is really to convince you from every biblical angle that we possibly can to commit yourself wholeheartedly to gospel community. We want the scriptures to shape for us what that looks like. And as we see God's design, I hope that what pricks you is, I need that, I want that, I'm already saved into that, I'm called to that, and I will grow through that. And that's what we hope to see happen over the next month. Well, years ago, I received a very special present from my in-laws. It was a volleyball with a handmade print on it. You see, in my brother-in-law, his name is Tyler. And so they can't call me Tyler, and so they had to come up with another word to distinguish between the Tylers. And so by default, I was Wilson, okay? That was me. I was Wilson. And some of those of you who are young don't maybe remember, but there was a movie that came out called Castaway, right? If you haven't seen it yet, I'm not going to give you a spoiler alert. Like, you had your 2 decades, okay? You had your shot to watch it. But basically, Tom Hanks is on a plane to Malaysia. It crashes. He's stranded on an island for 4 years, right? And we see in those 4 years a very vivid picture of what happens when people are isolated, right? They start talking to volleyballs. And they cry when they lose those volleyballs, right? We see the effects on the brain of being alone. Dr. John Cacioppo, who's the director of neuroscience at University of Chicago, he studied isolation for 20 years, which just sounds riveting, right? And he says that the physical and mental repercussions of chronic isolation and loneliness are major. He says this: loneliness puts your brain in self-preservation mode. The health effects are absolutely frightening, from depression to sleep to heart health to, honestly, death. It will lower your lifespan 26%, actually. The equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day is loneliness. It's why one of the most horrific tortures is what? Solitary confinement. Like, think about that for a moment. Let's just remove people from someone. Like, no, you can whip someone, you can do all these horrible things, but the worst is just to take them away from human interaction, right? It makes you go crazy. And humanity still today, we know the words of God from the beginning in the garden so well. It's not good for man to be alone. It's not good. And we know this, right? You don't need me to convince you of this. Like, you crave this kind of relationship and this close connection to give and to receive love. Do you remember middle school? Some of you are in middle school. Do you remember this? Like, this is the epicenter for wanting to belong and fit in, right? I don't know what it is now. Like, do you have the cool apps or whatever to fit in? I don't know. Or have you seen the right shows on Netflix? In my day, it was like what you wore, right? Like, did you have the Jinkos? You remember those? Some of you are like, what in the world? Basically, they were jeans where you could fit beach balls through each leg, okay? They were that big. Like, did you have that? Did you have the starter jacket? Did you have the bleached tips? Right, Clay? Yes. Oh, you totally did. I know you did. Okay, sorry, Clay. I thought you did. Maybe you didn't. All right, anyways, you just look like a guy who might have had bleached tips. Okay, cool. I love you, bro. I'm so sorry. Someone else is raising their hand for bleached tips. You're saved, okay? You're cool. And listen, that's not just a phase. Middle school is not just a phase. That's actually core to who we are. We want to belong. We never outgrow that. It's why the Fortune 500 companies have tapped into this, right? Like, when you text, there's 2 colors, blue and green, right? And blue are your people, right, who have your kind of phone and service, and green are those other people who aren't the cool kids who don't have the iPhone. Oh my goodness, right? Like Apple has designed this very strategically. You're in or you're not. Starbucks, their original mission statement was not at all about coffee. What was it? To create community. Yeah, community. That's right. We can create a place for people to belong. I know that, yeah, there's coffee too, right? Like that was what they were after, man. Even this week, it's so funny. I grabbed this, anybody have a Simple Modern cup, like tumbler, like, like you drink something out of kind of a big company and sell them at Target? Well, I look at this empty Simple Modern box, and on the top, it says this: be known. It's a cup. It's a cup, right? But that's what happens. Nike, you name it, they're not selling products as much as they're selling inclusion. You can belong. You can be a part of this crew, right? From every angle, we know inherently belonging is essential to our wholeness and joy as a human. You are hardwired for this kind of relationship. And so I want to ask us, where does that hardwiring come from? And the answer, of course, is the first page of the scriptures, Genesis 1:26. Let us make man in our image, God announces. Let us make man in our image. We know very little about God at this point. It's Genesis 1. But what we do know about him in this verse, we get a massive glimpse into fundamentally who he is. Do you see the pronouns? They're plural, right? Us. Our. Wow, this is very interesting. We've already seen in Genesis 1:2, the Holy Spirit was hovering over the waters. And if we read the rest of our Bible, it begins to fill in this concept of a divine Trinity: God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. God is not three, and he is not one. He's mysteriously three in one. And we get a whisper of that in Genesis 1 right here. There's plurality within God. Our. And yet, there's unity in God, because what does it say? Image, singular. Ooh, interesting. Plurality, and yet how that plurality is going to be imprinted into humanity is there's a singular image, a singular essence of who God is. And so God makes male and female. He creates them, the next verse, right? There's going to be a plurality, same essence, but different expressions as we are to image the one image of a triune God. God exists in divine community. That's where this imprint is from. Tim Keller says it this way: within God's very nature is a divine rhythm or pattern of continuous giving and receiving. Not only love, but also glory and honor and life, each in its fullness. If God weren't Trinity, if he was rather a unity, one God and one person, there would be no divine community. Love would not flow within God, but it would rather be motionless. It would be isolation. But here's the good news. Love did flow within God, and it overflowed out of God into us, and he created us. And in creating us, he's inviting us into sharing the divine community, Father, Son, and Spirit. He's come to be in relationship with me. And not just that, but that imprint of oneness with him spills over horizontally into oneness together. We flip a chapter into chapter 2 of Genesis, right? Where we zoom in to day 6 of God's creation. And in chapter 2, what happens, it says this in 2:18, it's not good for man to be alone. He's made Adam, and now he pronounces that. It's been, up until that point, good, 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 very good. And now we hit the first time, not good. Not good. Adam by himself is not good. He wasn't designed for private religion. Like, you cannot image God in isolation and independence. And so the next few verses then, what does he do? Well, he maybe the animals are it, right? Nope. Sorry to crush that for you dog lovers out there. But that doesn't quite meet the standard, right, of that community. Now cat lovers already know that, but dog lovers might be crushed today. But we get that. It doesn't work. And so then finally, alas, verse 23, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, the first ever human interaction. And what do we have? Poetry erupting. It's igniting this connection between them. And then 24 and 25, we get the picture of that oneness of imaging God in the first community. They're naked, they're unashamed, there was vulnerability and yet trust. There's no self-absorption, there's no envy or rivalry or abuse or looking out for myself. No, there's perfect trust and absolute unity within that plurality. That's the divine blueprint. And it's the blueprint that you were made for. It's been etched into your soul to walk in deep gospel-centered community with others, to share richly in life's experiences and life's emotions and life's questions and doubts with other people, to walk with people in such a way that you have hurt your belly kind of laughs with them. And you also have the call you in a crisis moments with them. And they're people that are safe to confess your sins and weaknesses to. And on the backside, you're going to receive acceptance and love and encouragement with truth. You were made for that, not isolation or independence or self-reliance, but for that flow of love, of relationship imprinted in you from God. Okay, well, I know that it's not good for me to be alone. I know that it's good for me to be with others. I get that, right? Well, why do we not throw ourselves fully into it then? Why do the vast majority of us, even ones in this room, even ones who appear to be around people and, hey, I'm super introverted and yeah, I'm Mr. Community Guy, yet they keep community, honestly, stiff-armed at a distance. And they're around community, but not really fully in this vision of gospel community. What happened? What went wrong? Why do I don't know about you, but when I look around and I see our city and I see our country, like I see people who maybe are nice on the surface often, but behind closed doors and behind the scenes, what's happening, right? There's competition and there's envy and there's comments that tear down, right? They're only for you when it benefits them. I see clearly on social media people duking it out, right? Like more divided, more provoked, more angry, more frustrated, more pride and arrogance about my opinions, even if it's I'm just going to slip this out there, for you. Still there's this air of like, you should think like me, right? We just see that everywhere. I see people who are abused and mistreated and neglected and ostracized. And I see homes broken. Even though they're polished on Instagram, they're actually decaying on the inside. And I certainly see it even in the church. I don't know what your church experience has been, but man, prior to the well, and I certainly hear people coming into the well going, man, I just see so much fakeness in the church, right? Like show up, slap a smile on, hi, how you doing? Hey, I'm great, Jack, how are you? And then what happens to Jack? A week later, he's filing for divorce. You're like, what's going on? Like she's in recovery. Like, why weren't you talking to someone who knew you, right? Man, I see people so desperate for acceptance and belonging. They will throw themselves into the first person who likes them or the first community, organization, whatever that accepts them. And so they settle for counterfeits and shallower levels of it. Man, I certainly see loneliness. I see people horribly lonely. Did you know in 1970, 15% of our country was lonely? The same study, the same metrics in 2016, that jumps to 43%. Now, in 4 years from that point to January 2020, catch that, January, it goes from 43% to 60%. Same questions. Nothing's changed about the study or the researchers. 60%. That's before the pandemic. Right? Like it's so bad that the UK has a minister of loneliness now. No lie. It's that much of an epidemic. I see it all the time in counseling room. I don't know that anybody has gone. We've had dozens of people go through our free counseling ministry. I don't know that anybody has filled out an intake form and not put that they struggle with loneliness. Not one. And then you throw on the last 10 months, right? Where you're involuntarily being separated and isolated and distancing people. And man, can you imagine the effects? I know it's impacted you. Whether you think it has or not, it has. And it's certainly impacted you more if you're living alone, or it's impacted you more if you're elderly. I know that there's so much protection there. Even kids are being impacted. I feel it. I don't know about you. I feel it. I mean, I showed up at Gospel Community the other day for men's night, and I was just like, oh, I'm craving. Like, I about wept just being able to be with other brothers and talk about life. Like, I miss this, right? Well, wait, Tyler, aren't we so connected, right? Aren't we so connected? Like, there's so many social media platforms out there, at least the ones that haven't been, shut down yet. And there's still enough out there, right, that you can post on and interact on. We're so connected. Well, think about that, like think about drinking Dr. Pepper in the middle of the desert, okay? It has an allure. Yeah, I think that I need this. This is going to give me what I need. But in reality, it's not quenching your thirst. It's what? Just drying you out more on the inside. That's not real relationship. It can serve real relationship if done right, but it's not real relationship, okay? That's why all the studies are going to show you the more you're on social media, actually the more lonely you are. Heavy users of social media, that 60% goes up to 73%. Like, it doesn't help. Professor Sherry Turkle, in her book Alone Together, labels our generation as this: never disconnected yet always alone. The most connected generation ever, while at the same time the loneliness. And here's the deal: it doesn't matter how many people you have surrounding you. It doesn't matter if you're introverted or extroverted. Like, there's no discrimination of loneliness. It doesn't look at you at Section 8 housing or a gated chateau, right? Like, it doesn't matter about your paycheck or your personality. I don't care what your Enneagram is. Loneliness comes for you. People are screaming for that divine community in Genesis 1 and 2. Why? Because of Genesis 3. We flip the page again and we see Adam and Eve eat the fruit and mistrust God. What happens? Everything's fractured. Broken between us and God. And what does that do? It translates into brokenness between us and others. And you read Genesis 3 and the progression. What happens? You see guilt and shame. They sew fig leaves to cover themselves now. They don't want to be known, right? And then instead of, rather than confiding, they run and hide, right, from God. There's fear there. And then not only is there guilt, shame, and fear, but there's also this blame game, right? So now instead of owning my own, like, I'm pointing the finger and I'm deflecting and I'm distancing myself from the person that I was once one with. And then Genesis 3:16 happens, and there's enmity and strife in the once perfect community. Rather than serving one another, they're going to be fighting for control. Yeah, that's what happens to this relationship. Turn to Genesis 4, and you see very quickly jealousy, anger, envy, and it escalates quickly into what? Murder between brothers. And in that moment, when God confronts Cain on killing his brother, he says, "Where's Abel?" Genesis 4:9. Have you looked at what Cain says? He says thus, "I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" Like, I want you to feel the attitude in that statement, right? I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper, God? Am I supposed to care for him? Like I have a take care of me mentality. Fend for yourself. Like, do you hear the anti-community in that sentence? One chapter later, and that's what we find. And the spiral is fierce. If you know your Bible, Genesis 5 through 11 is a train wreck, right? Okay. Cool sermon, Tyler. If you're lonely, get in community. If you're angry, stop it. Social media is terrible. Cool sermon. All right, let's go to lunch. Well, it's a little more nuanced than that, okay? Am I talking to those who are lonely and isolated in here today? And am I encouraging you and going to exhort you to reach out beyond all your natural tendencies to actually initiate, to find community? Yes, I am. But it's more than just that. I'm not just talking to people in that camp. I'm also talking to those of you in here who think you're good. And I don't really need community. because I can do life on my own. Now, you would not say that, but you functionally operate like that. And you have your crew, but I'm good. I got my crew, not you. And there's so much self-reliance in your life. And I'm also talking to the camp in here that's in gospel community. Actually, you're just around gospel community. You're hovering on the outskirts and the fringes. You're 30% known or you're 60% known, but you are not 100% known. We have to do a little bit more work. I think of Judas, who was in that camp. He was in, but he was not all in. He was going through the motions of community. Meanwhile, stuff was occurring in his heart that he was not talking about. I think of David. Oh, David, great hero of the Bible, right? What happens post his brotherhood with Jonathan? Post his brotherhood with Joab and his mighty men in the military, that camaraderie, he begins to isolate in the comfortable position of the palace, sitting on the throne of Israel, but what also sitting on the throne of his own heart. And what begins to happen? Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster when you combine that kind of seclusion with I'm good. You get a kind of blindness that leads you to destroy your own life, and that's obviously the sequence we see in David's life. Church, you were not meant to be buffered behind your walls, living in a confidential Christianity. We'll love God. I'm going to love God, but the church, That's not how it works, right? Sunday morning, then I'm going to peace out for 6.5 days. That was never the biblical plan. Well, Tyler, I thought it was about a personal relationship with God. Yes, personal, yes. Private, no. No, it was never the biblical plan. You see, what started in the garden, it doesn't get scrapped. It gets saved as we turn the pages of the Bible. In the Old Testament, Genesis 12, God begins his redemptive plan. And he comes to a man named Abraham. And yes, it's an individual, but his plan is to include a corporate body. Through you, I'm going to make you a mighty nation, and all the families of the earth will be blessed through you. And we turn the pages into Exodus, and he's redeeming a conglomerate of people now out of Egypt. Not just one, but this huge nation of people. Now, and he's coming in and he's affectionately calling them my people. Let my people go. And we just see that phrase over and over. My people, my people, my people, right? Hundreds of times. He didn't say my man, my woman, my people. Leviticus 26:12. I will walk among you and you will be your God, and you shall be my people. Well, yeah, Tyler, but it was still a bit cliquish. It's just Jewish nationalist, right? Like it's still a holy huddle. Well, no. Read your law right in the Old Testament, right? There was absolutely provisions of how to treat the foreigner, how to treat the outsider, how to treat the Gentile. You see it all along, even Genesis 12. All the nations will be blessed. We see the bloodline of Christ having those outside the Jewish nation being incorporated into it. We see the prophets constantly talking about a light to the Gentiles. All along, God's plan was for a diverse, multifaceted community. Plurality and yet unity. And we see that the biblical characters who plant themselves openly in that gospel community, they thrive. And the biblical characters who go it alone or they coast on the outside, half-hearted, they become shells of persons. Proverbs even calls them fools. Have you ever noticed, you probably haven't, unless you have some Hebrew and Greek backgrounds, when you read the Bible, and we see, of course, the pronoun you all the time in there. Did you know 70% of the time you see the word you in your Bible, it's plural? Y'all. Okay? The Okie Bible would say y'all. Y'all are the light of the world. Y'all are a city on a hill. Y'all are the salt of the earth. Y'all are the temple of the Holy Spirit. If y'all abide in me and I abide in y'all, that is what the Word of God says. over and over and over. And we read it through me and he and she, but the Bible's theology is we. Amen. Always. We do it together. You can't ignore it. You can't ignore the 100 different one another commands in the New Testament. You can't ignore them. You can't ignore the language of the body of Christ and the members working together, or the language of family and brothers and sisters in Christ. You can't ignore that the mission strategy is not to send one guy or one girl out, but rather is to do it in teams of people, right? You can't ignore this. You can't ignore Acts 2:42 through 47, which, if you know this first picture of the early church, spectacular. What's happening is they're devoting themselves together to these beautiful things of breaking the bread, and the apostles' teaching was the word of God, and they're doing this together, having all things in common, giving, sharing with one another, daily attending the temple, together, praising God together as he's adding those who are being saved to the body. They're doing life together. Hear this, church. Mark this down. The gospel is not merely a theological truth to be mulled over in your own brain. It's something to be fleshed out on the pages of life with others. I'll say that again. The gospel isn't something just to be mulled over in your own brain. It's something to be fleshed out on the pages of life with others. You need to believe it, yes, but then that belief flows into application. You can't ignore it, and you certainly can't ignore Jesus. He entered into community. Emmanuel, God with us. And he lived among community. He, yes, was in a physical family, and within that family, he respected and submitted and trusted and loved. His mother was on his lips, even on the cross. And yet, as precious as Mary is, and as important as James, his brother, is, he also redefines what his primary community is. It's not blood family. It's actually, who are my brothers? Who are my mothers? Those who love the Father. So he sets even a higher priority over blood families, this new community, this new family, a spiritual family. When he goes at it in his ministry, he does not do life alone, does he? Well, sure, he carves out time for a communion alone with God. There is a beautiful solitude in Jesus' life. But he's not a monk, is he? He's not a monk, and he's not a boss who's lording over his little servants as his peons, as he's kind of on his own echelon. No. Amazingly, Jesus does life with the very people he's come to save. And he doesn't just surround himself with crowds, but he also has this group of about 70-ish that seem to be closer. And then, of course, he has a tighter circle of 12. And then even at times he'll pull 3 aside to share very intimate things with them. See, Jesus' total life is modeling this community. He not only modeled that, he taught it. His teaching is consistently giving instructions for the church. When he sends out his disciples, he sends them in pairs. When he prays his last words of prayer before the cross, John 17, do you remember what he's praying for? I pray, Father, they may be one as we are one. As you are in me and I am in you, that they may be in us, right? He paints the picture so often of his followers as sheep. And like we hear that and we get warm and fuzzy. We're like, oh yes, Jesus holding me in his arms, the great shepherd, precious moments, right? Psalm 23, oh yes, he just walks right beside me all the time. Listen, the idea of sheep is a flock mentality. This is flock language, right? Do I need to bust out the veterinarian dictionary for you guys? I will. Okay, here we go. Thank you for asking. Sheep display an intensely gregarious social instinct that allows them to bond closely to other sheep. Flock mentality movements not only protect individuals from predators, but also from themselves. Separation from the flock can cause severe stress and panic and should be avoided. Thank you, Merck, Manual of Veterinary Medicine. Like, hey, you matter individually. You do. You matter individually. And you matter to the shepherd personally, right? But when he goes after the one, he's going after the one to bring them back into the fold of the 99. He doesn't just go after the one so he can have this one-on-one the rest of eternity with them. No, get you back in the flock. Right. He taught it, and he died for it. Upon the cross with his own blood, he purchases the price for us fracturing community. He is rescuing us out of that individualized, privatized Christianity. I can go it alone. I can rely on myself. And by reconciling us to himself, he reconciles us to each other. When you are baptized, Matthew 28 says you're baptized into the name, singular name of what? Father, Son, Spirit, unity, plurality. You're baptized into a new family, a new community. Like, you cannot ignore that reality. Yes, the cross of Christ saves you from your sin. Yes, the cross of Christ saves you to God. But yes, the cross of Christ saves you into his family. And that reality, those realities are inseparable. And when he comes again, we cannot ignore the picture of Revelation when a diverse, multi-ethnic community is around the throne in unison singing, "Worthy is the Lamb. Salvation belongs to our God." So what's holding you back today, church, from being all in community? Let's get real. What's holding you back? What's keeping you in isolation? You're like, "Oh, the government." Okay, yes. Touché. There's someone in our church I want to honor who, without naming her, she's been a great example of someone who is quarantining. I know she's watching at home right now. And yet she has fought for gospel community the last 10 months. She's on the Marco Polo of her group. She's memorizing scripture with her group. At holidays, she's finding a way to give away food safely in a parking lot because she wants to fight for community. And her community goes to her place and carols outside her doors. You can still fight for community, even in this weird, crazy time. Right? Because it's not about your circumstances, and it's not about these external factors, though there are many that are trying to keep you from being connected. At the end of the day, the heart of the matter is a matter of the heart. What's keeping you from connecting? I think there is, within that Genesis 3 fracturing from our sin, a multitude of fears of why we don't fight for it and why we seek it in the wrong places and why we settle for counterfeits. Ask yourself, so I'm going to go through a few of these fears. Is this me? On each one, honestly ask yourself, is this me? Number one, the fear of rejection. Well, they won't accept me, right? Like, if they knew this about me, there's no way they would love me, or maybe I'm not smart enough or funny enough or know the Bible enough. Number two, fear of being exposed. Well, my weaknesses are going to be seen, right? Like, I don't measure up, and I don't want them to know that, so I'm going to stay at a distance and project an image of who I am so that I can control others' perception of me. And I got to put my best foot forward. I got to, cape flapping in the wind, show up to community. So there's that fear there of my life's not really as cool, or I'm not really as great and holy as I am, and they're going to see that. Number three, the fear of not being understood. Well, nobody will be able to relate to me. My experience, my life, no one else can understand it. And they can't possibly then care for me because I'm the only one. Number four, the fear of failing socially. Now, maybe this is your personality, maybe it's your background and experiences and situations, but just talking to others is sometimes really hard. And if that's you, that's okay. And I found actually that many times those who fall into this category, they're actually incredible at connecting with people if they can just get over that hump initially of that first conversation, right? Like they know how to connect well, but just hard to get through that, and so they retreat. Number 5, the fear of being needy. Well, relying on others makes me feel dependent, and I don't want to be that. And right, like I don't want to tell you how to pray for me. I got this. And there's this individualistic nature discipled into us, right? Do you hate group projects? Anybody else? Yeah, like this is you, right? Guess what? It's pride. Yeah, it's harder, but it's still pride that you don't want to be needy and depend on others. Number 6, the fear of being hurt again. Maybe you are like me and you've had some painful experiences in community. And you've been wronged and you've had disappointments in relationships and things have gone the wrong way. You've put yourself out there. I've tried this, Tyler, and it went horribly wrong. And so then there's this fear of, I'm not going to do that again. Number 7, the fear of discomfort. Listen, if I actually do this and take the plunge, it's going to break up my comfortable, predictable life and routine. Like there's going to be some awkwardness in that. There's going to be some demands that are put on me. I just don't want to deal with that, right? Like I'm content. And number 8, lastly, the fear of commitment. Oof, I'm busy. I just don't have time for that. Which is code for I don't really value it, honestly. If that's what, I'm just going to break through it. It's not a priority. Well, it's just a certain season of my life. You know, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and there's a lot. Hey, I get seasons of life can make it harder. But what I found is often those who say it's a season of life, 7 years later, they're still in that season of life. And they haven't actually made the plunge to commit. I think we fear the cost of love and its inconvenience. And these fears are why we resist community. You know, it's at the end of the day, I don't think we just see our need enough. And our need and others' need for it enough. And the superiority of the vision that Jesus lays out for a community centered around him isn't powerful enough to us to displace these fears and overcome them. We need Jesus to rescue us, you guys. Thankfully, he has. And you go back through those fears one by one. And what do you begin to do? You start inserting, but God. But God, because perfect love drives out fear, and it overcomes that autonomy and shame and pride. And so the fear of rejection, guess what? Christ has been rejected for me, and now I'm accepted eternally. Regardless of whether you accept me or not, I'm already accepted, so I'm free to go in and lay my junk out to you. Well, the fear of being hurt again. Well, you probably will be hurt again. Let's just burst that bubble right now, okay? If you've been in church long enough, you've been in community, people will fail you because guess what? They're not Jesus and they will let you down. But here's the deal. There is one who will never let you down. And the church of Jesus should be so tied to him that even though we are going to sin and hurt each other, we're going to repent and apologize and move forward together and own our sin and experience forgiveness. And actually, it's going to be tighter and more unifying in the end. Well, the fear of being exposed. Well, guess what? You already are. Christ knows you. And he still went to the cross. What could you possibly share that he doesn't already know and didn't already claim over your sin? Finished. Do you see how the gospel speaks into every one of these? And he begins to redeem our fears and answer them. And so I actually want to take a moment. I want to invite someone up from our church to share his story real briefly of how Jesus redeemed these fears in his life and overcame them. So Terry Banks, come up and share a little bit.
Hey, church. My name is Terry. I'm actually a new member to the Well here, but my family and I have been coming here for a little over 2 years, actually. I want to talk about gospel community. I want to talk about how soul-satisfying and vital gospel community is. And I'm going to pack that all into like 3 minutes, so bear with me here. This time about 10 months ago, I did not really care for gospel community. I'd occasionally show up to church and GC, but to be honest, I didn't see the true value of it. I placed value in my needs, my wants. How can I please Terry? I had isolated myself and was in a deep hole created from my own digging. I had no idea how to climb out. But in my darkest moment of that time, my friend Terrell Spears, who I met through Gospel Community here at the Well, he called me. He called me out of the blue just to check on the worst week of my life and how badly I needed to talk to someone else at that time. How gracious the Lord was to send a friend to me in that darkest moment without that friend even knowing it. How merciful the Lord was to not let me stay in that pit. And after talking with Terrell, I had talked to a few others who, and hear me on this, they came beside me. They walked with me through those dark hours. There was no sitting across the table judging me, describing my own failure to me. It was all grace. It was the Lord's love shining through. So I'm not really sure if I can describe the importance of Gospel Community to you. I can tell you that Gospel Community is a model straight from the gospel. Jesus had a community. There's a quote by Paul Tripp when talking about dependency, and it really does speak to the heart of community. He says, dependency means living as if I really do believe my walk with God is a community project. It means that because of the blinding power of remaining sin, I give up on the belief that no one knows me better than I know myself. Dependency means no longer being afraid of exposure because I really do believe that there is nothing that could be known, exposed, or revealed about me that has not already been addressed by the person and work of Jesus. It means living as if I really do believe that isolated, individualized, independent Christianity never produces good fruit. So there's a couple things that I want to leave with you. One is a verse. James 5:16 says, therefore confess your sins to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person has great power as it is working. Looking back at the pit I was in and where I am now is the Lord's work. He graciously and mercifully sent a community of people around me to press in and truly show me what healing looks like.
Love you, brother. Thank you for sharing that. As the band comes up and we begin to respond, I want to highlight just a couple things from what Terry said. A year ago, he was not really in GC. He was existing on the very, very fringes. He was disconnected. Today, as we multiply GCs next month, Terry and his wife Alice are going to be co-leaders of a gospel community. That's what can happen in a year. The second thing I want to point out is what you already know. All of that happened within the last year during a thing called COVID. And so we really, again, cannot use that as an excuse to not fight for community. The most difficult time it's ever been in our generation to connect, and yet that's their story. That they found a kind of community centered around Jesus, not around common interests, not that we go to the same gym together or have the same sports team, not that we grew up in the same area, or that we both like Parks and Rec. Those are not the things that their community is centered around. It's not their age or their season of life. None of those things are it. They can only take you so far. The foundation of the community they've found is nothing other than the strong, deep blood of Jesus. Amen. And that through him, they no longer have to prove themselves. You don't have to prove yourself anymore. You don't have to experience all the insecurity of trying to impress and trying to make sure others' perceptions of you are a certain way. Like Christ takes care of that. Gospel community is fundamentally different because day one, there's already a knitting together that happens through Christ because our underlying common bond is him, and it's stronger than anything else. No matter our differences, there's a greater unity that creates that. I don't know about you, how freeing is that to hear? Maybe you go, man, I've tried that. I've been in that. I trust me. If you cannot say with me that is spectacular and that is freeing. Then I just don't think you've ever experienced actual gospel community. Because when you taste it, you know it. This is different. I've never walked in this kind of relationship and depth before with other believers. That kind of community is there, church. But let me leave you with this. You've got to want it. You have to want it. The last 15 years of ministry for me, I've seen one thing, one factor above all else determines whether you will walk in community or not. And it is this: are you going to commit to it? That's it. It's the number one factor of whether you will experience commitment or not. Will you commit to it? Those who want it, find it. Paul Miller says the biggest problem people have in searching for community is just that. You don't find community. You create it through love. And the people who find community seem to be mostly the people who have chosen to commit to community. We can have as much community as we're willing, but we can't create it until we first commit to it. Church, you were made for this deep community centered around Jesus. And yes, your sin, and yes, culture around us wants to keep us from this community. But Jesus can step in and redeem your apathy and redeem your fears, empower you to commit to doing life closely with other believers. Let's pray together. Oh, Jesus, we thank you. Thank you that in your great wisdom you designed us for this picture, the church, how beautiful it is. And yes, it is fractured, and yes, it is broken, and yes, it is messy, and yes, our sin and other sin is involved, but yes, you are able to redeem it, Jesus. And so we just ask for your help right now. Would you overcome our fears? Would you swoop in, Holy Spirit, with your power to impress upon us the necessity of this vision and the beauty of this vision so much that it would displace any type of fear, especially the fear of commitment. And we would say, yes, I'm all in. No matter how hard it is, no matter the cost, I'm all in. Lead us over the next 4 weeks to see the depths of this design more and more and more. For the sake of your name and your church, Jesus. Amen.